Hi, my name is Reagan Miller, and today I'll be talking to you about nonverbal communication in sport. For the research process, I knew I was interested in this topic in athletics, so my keywords were nonverbal communication, sport, coaching, and athletics. I found 3 studies, one on basketball, one on football, and one on volleyball, and I stuck with volleyball because I have familiarity with and interest in the sport. I also really appreciated the emphasis on game outcome and contrasting the nonverbal behavior between the top and bottom teams in the league. Um, so the paper I picked was an examination of nonverbal behaviors in successful and unsuccessful professional volleyball teams. The purpose was to understand the impact that nonverbal communication has on team success, specifically for professional volleyball matches. And then for the background and literature review, 3 important points that stuck out to me. One was that winning doubles teams exchange messages more frequently and reliably than other teams, and this is in reference to tennis. 2, athletes use nonverbal behaviors such as hand signals, gestures, facial expressions, and more to share tactics, information, and coordinate action when verbal communication is either not ideal or not possible. And lastly, that certain nonverbal behaviors facilitate trust and communication, and then that physical touch can communicate emotion, regulate social interactions, and predict effective performance. So the overarching theme or the big question in this article is, what is the relationship between nonverbal communication and team success in real-time professional volleyball games? So this study utilized a naturalistic systematic observation design, which was described in the text as a practical method of examining nonverbal behaviors in ongoing and novel contexts. And overall, participants were unaware they were being evaluated. So for the procedure, the first step was picking out the participants. The top 4 and the bottom 4 teams from the 2016 to 2017 Turkish Men's Volleyball First League was selected. This was the top league in Turkey at the time. Video recordings of matches from each of these teams were selected, and they were then observed under 3 categories: a win, a loss, and then a tiebreak match. So then the coding scheme was set, and to do this, they conducted interviews with 2 current professional and national level coaches, a sport psychologist consultant who was in communication or had been in communication with a lot of teams and a lot of the professional teams in Turkey, and lastly, a former professional athlete. And these interviews helped them contextualize and code certain behaviors. And in total, 8 nonverbal behaviors were established as target behaviors, and then they were categorized as either positive or negative in nature. Third, the coding was undergone. The coding of nonverbal behaviors was conducted with behavioral observation research interactive software, also known as BORIS, which allowed users to define certain behaviors and associate those with certain keys on a keyboard. And then the total data of 24 games was coded over a span of 3 months using the BORIS method. And the data collected was restricted to only periods of time in between points, because this was the time where the most nonverbal interactions were exchanged. Lastly, you had data analysis, which was done using R statistical software. It was a non-pragmatic Mann-Whitney U-test that was performed with 95% confidence interval to determine whether there was a significant difference in the amount of nonverbal behaviors present in successful versus unsuccessful teams. So for the results, successful teams displayed more behaviors in every category than their unsuccessful counterparts, except for the symbols for sharing tactics category. Overall, all the categories you had were instructional, nonverbal behaviors, symbols for sharing tactics, celebratory NVBs, supportive NVBs, team gathering after a point, negative NVBs, objection to referee, and partial team gathering. According to medium scores, successful teams displayed more instructional NVBs and supportive NVBs than less successful teams. For the supportive, the median for the successful team was 42.5, whereas the median for the unsuccessful was 24.5. And then for the instructional, it was 18 compared to 12. So overall, successful teams had more frequent use of instructional nonverbal behaviors during the games that they won. They had more supportive behaviors when they lost, and then in tiebreak matches, they had more of both of these behaviors. So the discussion really honed in on three different topics. One, that support breeds success. Supportive touch is an indication of cooperation in team sports and creates an environment where players aren't stressed about their errors and are allowed to play free. And these environments have empirical links to improved performance, which is why they think that that was more associated with the successful teams. Instruction promotes order. Instructive nonverbal behaviors, such as showing where teammates should stand and other gestures, allow athletes to share what they call task relevant knowledge in a short period of time in the really dynamic sport environments. And this kind of organization leads to more cohesive plays. Lastly, emotional stability promotes victory. The results indicate that supportive nonverbal behaviors were vital for successful teams in tiebreak situations. Close games are very emotionally demanding for athletes, meaning that emotional support is very important. And successful teams were better able to meet this need they were better able to meet this need than their non-successful counterparts. Lastly, my critiques. One was that it was a small sample size, only 24 matches were analyzed, so there's not a lot of statistical power in that, and you can't pick up on trends that may occur over multiple seasons. But I do feel like the authors did acknowledge this and responded accordingly by using non-parametric statistics. Secondly, there was room for bias in the method section. I thought it was super thorough, and I thought the procedure was very well thought out, especially including interviews with relevant people to help contextualize the coding, but they only had one person coding all matches, so I feel like that leaves a lot of room for bias despite the training. And lastly, correlation does not equal causation. While I feel like there was a lot of information that helped you easily understand the tests and everything was well described, you can't determine that supportive and instructional nonverbal behaviors necessarily cause greater success. That is my presentation, and thank you for watching.